Thanks for joining me today, Tsahi. Let's talk about the evolution of WebRTC. This is something you've blogged about before regularly, and I believe you say that we are entering a new era. Tell us
Yes,
about that.
the fourth one. So I think I got into this thing in around 2019, and when I wanted to write something, and then I came with these eras. And the first one was, well, we start with WebRTC, when we started with WebRTC somewhere in 2011, 2012, it was about kind of an exploration process. There is WebRTC, there is this thing. It works sometimes, not always, in Chrome, not in Firefox, but oh, it does, but not together with Chrome in interoperability. That is data channel, that one doesn't. Things didn't work well. So you've seen a lot of people asking, should we use WebRTC? Is that the right thing to do? What happens next? It doesn't work on Internet Explorer. Do you remember that thing, Internet Explorer? So we can't use WebRTC at all.
Right.
So that was the first 4 or 5 years. But then we came into the era of growth. And that's when the question changed of how do we use it? We know that WebRTC is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. It's a real thing. And then Edge and Safari joined into the crowd and had WebRTC support in them. So we all knew that it was time to start using WebRTC. Now, in all of these phases, exploration and growth, the differentiation that we had is just by being first or before others in the market to figure out how to use WebRTC and where to use it exactly. Then came the era of differentiation around 2020, which meant that WebRTC is here to stay. We've used it, we're using it, there are enough production services out there. And now the question is, how do I make my service different than your service? What should I need to do in order to rise above the level of the noise? Because everyone is building the exact same thing with WebRTC. It acts and behaves almost the same.
Yeah.
At this point in time, we had WebRTC 1.0. Finally, we had a specification out there. Nobody cared, but we had one. We had Zoom that didn't use WebRTC. They are starting to use it today, by the way. They had some messaging in there that December is going to be a GA for the WebRTC SDK support for Mac or something like that. Then, and you had to compete with Zoom. So how do I compete with Zoom and differentiate from them? And then we had this minor thing called the pandemic that blew everything, and everyone's now from home, and we're using remote, and remote is WebRTC in many cases. And I didn't think about the fact that, well, it's time to move to a new era in WebRTC, and we're somewhere else today.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, well, why don't I do what everyone else does? I just call it generative AI and call it a day. Okay, so now we've got generative AI. Everyone is doing generative AI. It's based on LLMs and OpenAI, ChatGPT. But what exactly does it mean? What is the question that we're now asking? And the question that you've seen in the last 2 or 3 months, and this is in the WebRTC Insights all the time, it's what can we automate? What can we do with generative AI that fits into WebRTC? The most mundane thing is, well, let's talk to a bot. Instead of talking to a person, let's put ChatGPT on the other side of the conversation. And instead of sending in text prompts, we're going to talk to him. I'm going to do speech to text, pass it to ChatGPT, then send back to text to speech, and we've got a conversation. So how do we do that exactly? So that's one aspect of generative AI. But I think we're starting to put generative AI almost everywhere in WebRTC and elsewhere. Hence, we now have a kind of an era of WebRTC that I'm not sitting quite well within my chair by saying that, because it's not defined around the word like exploration, growth, differentiation, but rather about the technology, generative
Right.
AI. And the reason it is done that way, I think, is because nobody cares now about anything else. It's like the whole market everywhere is, if you have AI in your slides, we're going to give you money as a VC. If you don't, we're not going to give you money. No matter
Yeah.
how important it is, what it is that you're doing, or how stupid it is, what you're doing with AI. And it just trickled to WebRTC as well, and to the point where we're not looking at differentiation. I don't care how do I make my service better than yours or rise above the crowd, besides if that's going to use generative AI in it, which
Mm-hmm.
means using bots and trying to talk to machines and adding summaries and stuff like that. I think that this is where we're headed now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it makes sense. And it's, you and I have both been involved in the WebRTC space since that initial exploration years. And it's a relief that probably neither one of us has written a blog post about Internet Explorer, certainly, or Safari in a very long time. So that's great to move past that. But yeah, I think Gen AI is certainly a somewhat abused and overused term in a way. I wonder if kind of in the next sort of era will, I think a lot of these labels are going to kind of go away because in a way, like WebRTC, I guess I would say part of the reason somebody doesn't necessarily care about the technology of WebRTC anymore is because it's stable, it works well, and it's an important part of modern web and mobile applications. And because it's stable and works well, it's kind of plumbing, right? So we still need plumbers. It's still very important for sure, but it's not the glamorous part necessarily. And Gen AI brings some of that glamour, right? But
Yeah.
I think there's going to be a phase where we stop talking about that as a term necessarily too, because it's just there's always some portion of your application that's going to have an element of AI or Gen AI or LLMs or whatever. So yeah, I'll be curious to see what how we refer to that in the future. So, but for now, at least, I guess what you're saying is that we're not going to differentiate anymore based on the communication application itself. The differentiation is all in how do we automate around that, and what aspects does maybe my service automate versus your meeting tool, and how well do they automate them, that sort of thing. Is that right?
Yes and no. We still want to grow, so we're still doing growth. We still want to differentiate, so we're still doing that. But I think
Mm-hmm.
most of the focus and the resources and the attention is going towards generative AI in these services, no matter what it is that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
In the education space, healthcare, again, everything with WebRTC, even CPaaS platforms, they're all doing generative AI. I don't recall anyone saying in the last half year that they are doing now bigger meetings,
Right. Right.
doing
Right.
more things around live.
Yeah.
If you even look at Twilio, we talked about that. They decided to sunset, then they came back, but somewhere in between, they threw out live. The streaming part is gone.
Yep.
Then they decided, well, if you really want group calls, okay, we will do
Yeah.
it for you. What
Yeah.
we're really here to do is customer engagement, one-on-one.
Yep.
I'm
Yeah.
starting to feel that this one-on-one is actually one to no one, like one to machine. At some
Right.
point, that's what it's going to be. It's not
Yeah.
even two people. So I also started thinking to have now four different types of services in WebRTC: the one-on-one, group, broadcast, and one-to-machine, which is like
Mm-hmm.
because it's different than one-on-one, and you see this by the type of challenges that we have there.
Yeah.
And I think that this is the generative AI part of it, just
Yeah.
figuring out and understanding what needs to be done there, and the new use cases that this is going to open for the vendors that start using it.
Yeah. No, I agree completely, and I think the one-to-machine type of scenario is an intriguing one for sure, and I think that's the sort of innovation that we'll see in this era of the evolution of WebRTC, and I think is yeah, it's interesting. I mean, one-to-machine right now in most uh, deployed applications would mean like a text bot type of thing, or maybe there's some audio in there, but we're not far off from doing one-to-machine where there is full two-way video, even with the AI, I think, and I mean, twice this week I was listening to a podcast for the first time and quickly realized that it was not, it was two bots talking to each other, right? It was one of the AI generated podcasts based off of people's blog posts and stuff. And in a way, it was a nice way to consume that content. In another way, I basically heard the same two AI hosts in both of these. You could tell it was the same service. It's a little bit annoying, right? So for the record, you and I are real. This is real. But nonetheless, it shows that we're not too far off from making those things a little more believable, more useful, more realistic, and with video components to them.
I had a friend that wanted to write a comment on the LinkedIn post. He sent that, and he said, "Should I write this?" I said, "Yes, it's fine." And then someone else said, "No, here's what ChatGPT made out of it." I looked at it, and I got the shivers. It wasn't human anymore.
Yeah.
Which was, if it's perfect, it's not human. That's the problem now.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
You need to strive to make mistakes in order to be understood that you are human.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that will bring up, and I think this is an interesting question that, our industry will have to consider, because a lot of the work that Gen AI will be involved in sort of the WebRTC space that we work in will be things like contact centers, more sophisticated versions of bots and stuff like that. And how human do you actually want to make it? And, at what point do you get real humans involved? Yeah. And, I think there is value. I mean, if you're trying to pass it off as a real human, you almost want to add in some imperfection, or just don't pass it off as a real human anyways, and make it clear where those boundaries are. And I think people are okay with that too. Depends on what they're looking for in that particular interaction with the brand, right? So yeah, it's an interesting space for sure. So there's a lot more that we can talk about this, and I'm sure we will in future conversations too. But you also are putting together some workshops around this, I believe. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, so I'm going to do a workshop around WebRTC and generative AI, and mostly look at the different use cases and map the technology challenges and where people need to look at in order to fix them and solve them. Because if you try to just connect to the WebRTC to generative AI with speech to text, text to speech, and an LLM engine like OpenAI, the end result is going to be crap because it's going to be too slow. So instead of getting something interactive, you'll get something that is still prompt-based, and it's not what you expect in 2025. So that's what the workshop is going to be around, and it's going to happen in February.
Okay, perfect. Coming up in February of 2025, and I assume they can learn more by going to bloggeek.me?
Yep.
Excellent. Perfect. Well, thanks as always for sharing your insights with us today, Tsahi. To learn more about Tsahi's work, you can check out bloggeek.me. And to learn more about future episodes of WebRTC Live, check us out at WebRTC.ventures. Thanks, Tsahi.
Thanks, Arin.
Thanks for joining us for WebRTC Live. Visit our website at WebRTC.ventures to learn more about our custom design and development services, and to learn more about upcoming episodes of WebRTC Live.